Actor Yaphet Kotto died a few days ago on March 15th, 2021, and I think very few people realize just how profoundly he changed the way that stories are told. Well, science fiction stories, anyway. I'm talking, of course, about his magnificent performance in Ridley Scott's 1979 masterpiece, Alien. Now, when I first saw Alien in a movie theater in my freshman year at college, I remember the shock and, frankly, the outrage that I felt watching Kotto's character, Nostromo Chief Engineer Parker. I remember thinking, come on, this guy's not an astronaut. Now, he most certainly is not an astronaut. He was the typical Detroit Union guy, fundamentally competent but lazy, unmotivated, bitter, resentful, and constantly bitching about how little he was getting paid. I just hated him for the first half hour. Alien is a masterpiece for three reasons. The first was the writing. The second was the cast. There are only 7 people in the entire film, and by the end of that first half hour, you realize that you're not watching a science fiction movie about astronauts for the first time. You're watching a film about working people, just regular schmoes doing a boring, dirty, and unglamorous job who, through sheer bad luck, find themselves in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. Every performance in that movie is absolutely pitch perfect. Tom Skerritt's Captain Dallas, an informal, loose but tough assistant manager in an insurance firm. John Hurt's fragile decency as Kane, who would go on to give us the most shocking death scene in the history of the movies. Ian Holmes' icy, repressed, and ominous Ash, and especially Veronica Cartwright as Lambert, the navigator on board the doomed Nostromo, who from the first frame to the last radiated absolute, perpetual, mind-numbing fear. But for me, there were 3 standout performances in that amazing cast. Yaphet Kotto as Parker gave one of them, and Harry Dean Stanton as his assistant, Brett. Well, together, they brought such cigarette-smoking, obscenity-spewing reality to the film, not to mention some desperately needed comic relief. And to my utter amazement, when it came time for Yaphet Kotto's Parker to face those acid-dripping jaws, I felt it. I felt it. I loved him. Underneath all of that bluster and griping was a genuine hero. And then, of course, there's Sigourney Weaver as Ripley. Now, for those of you born after 1979, you will never believe the astonishment and, to be perfectly honest, a vague sense of discomfort of seeing a female character being that tough and that resourceful. Ellen Ripley kicked ass. But unlike today's female leads who are utterly fearless, utterly unemotional, hard-punching killing machines, Ripley was scared out of her wits the entire time, just like everybody else was. It was her ability to function in spite of her fear that made Ripley not only admirable, but believable. That's the main reason that Alien worked so well, the reason it was such a masterpiece, because those people were real. They weren't steely-eyed missile men like Dave Bowman and Frank Poole in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they weren't lantern-jawed Space Patrol Rangers either. They're just regular people with no military training and no weapons and nowhere to run. People who didn't want to be there. People who just wanted to go home. But the third reason Alien remains a masterpiece is because of the alien itself. I'm not talking about the monster. Yes, the monster's impressive and weird, but it's not the suit that made that movie and all of the subsequent sequels, good and bad, so downright terrifying. The thing that really put the hook into people was the way the alien reproduced, because you were the one that was going to give birth to these creatures. If a facehugger got a hold of you, you became both a mother and a food source for this monster that ate you away from the inside, then killed you in unspeakable agony the moment you were no longer useful. It's horrible. Now, as it turns out, that horrific life cycle exists in the real world. Believe it or not, there's an animal that reproduces in exactly the same way. It's called the parasite wasp, and it was the inspiration for Alien. First, a female parasite wasp finds a nice fat host organism and inserts her eggs into the creature. As the eggs hatch into larvae, they begin to consume the animal from the inside out. This paralyzes the host, and then 60 to 80 of these larvae soon grow big enough to burst through the skin, and then the host dies. The adult parasite wasps emerge and start looking for new host organisms to destroy in order to create more parasite wasps. And now, finally, we get to the political point of all this. Because despite all of their howling about cultural appropriation, it's the progressives that have relentlessly stolen a culture and used it for their own selfish and nefarious purposes. They are cultural parasite wasps, injecting their ideas into rich, thriving, and well-loved stories, myths, and heroes. Here are the Ghostbusters. Here's Doctor Who. Here's Ian Fleming's 007. Here's the Terminator, and here's the leader of the human resistance to Terminators. Here's Bat Person. Here are Viking warriors. Here's a Jedi named Skywalker. And here's Marvel's newer, gayer Captain America. So why is all of this happening? Well, it's happening for a very simple reason. Despite, more likely because of, the endless bullying, the strident demands, the unparalleled arrogance, the unearned moral superiority, the disrespect for anything or anyone or any idea different than their own rigid code, their inhuman lack of humor or fun or the ability to see things from a different point of view, because of all of the items in the woke salad bar of despair, no one wants these inhuman, inverted, and insane progressive values. No one is buying it. You see, these so-called new characters are not characters at all. These new takes on classic heroes are one-dimensional mouthpieces for a one-dimensional philosophy. They're eggs injected into a host organisms named James Bond and Doctor Who and Ghostbusters and the Terminator and Star Trek and Star Wars. Progressives are cultural parasites that inject their horrific values into these things because people like them. They used to, anyway. Not anymore. These once thriving cultural icons have been utterly abandoned by the people who liked them, and in fact, by the people who have loved them dearly for their entire lives. All of these franchises that appeal to everyone because of their universal stories and their themes have been utterly abandoned because the SJW larvae injected into them have exploded out into plain view. You see, the left thought that they could use cultural mythologies like Star Wars and Star Trek as kind of a Trojan horse, a way to get past people's natural defenses against such vile ideas. They probably thought that if they put woke into the Millennial Falcon or Starfleet uniform, then people would learn the lessons that were being hammered into them at every opportunity, but that's not what's happening. People, young people, the next 2 or even 3 generations want nothing to do with re-education camps masquerading as entertainment. People would rather go hungry than consume this SJW poison. That's why I am so sure that despite all of today's turmoil and moral inversion, all of which, by the way, is going to get worse before they get better, we're going to win in the end. In 1979, Alien depicted a colorblind crew of men and women joking and griping and then ultimately all working together to stay alive. If you tried to make that movie today, progressives would insist that they eat in separate cafeterias and conduct sensitivity seminars and then complain about the racial, economic, and gender sequence in which they were being killed. Get woke, go broke is not just a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a natural reaction against such horrible ideas. It's justice that these things go out of business. You might even call it social justice.